Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you.
Welcome to the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast, episode 38. The podcast is almost as old as I am. We are back with another deep dive into a tale that happened on Hyde Street, Devour. This episode will air on December 18th, which also happens to be the release date of the Rockefellers number 2. I'm Snoggle, also known as Becky, and I am joined as usual by my special friend Nick and Rob from Comic Book Chronicles, who is making his triumphant return for a second go tonight. How are y'all doing?
Nick and Snoggle, are you guys tanning? You guys look suspiciously tan right now. Are you guys fake bacon? What's going on?
No, and definitely not with the lighting in my office ever. I usually look like Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Well, then, there can only be one explanation, and that is that you are both basking in the warm and sunny afterglow of interviewing Ghost Machine Grand Poobah Jeff Johns on episode 37 of this very podcast.
I see what I did there.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, talk to me, folks. What was he like? Did you sit on his lap and tell him what you wanted for Ghost Machine Christmas?
Essentially, yeah.
That's what I would have done.
Yeah, no, it was awesome to be able to talk with him, and he was just absolutely into really what we try to do here, which is make everything super conversational, like as if we were all just hanging out, talking about comic books. And he's the type of person, just like us, he's a fan, like he has been reading comic books his whole life. He loves comic books. He writes them as a fan. And I think he understands fans better than many as a result of that. So we're excited about having him back, and we're probably going to do some series-based deep dives with tandem interviews with him and artists. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, thanks for mentioning that. How's everything out there in Wisconsin?
Still no snow. I'm not, I ain't complaining about that, but it's cold enough to have it, but we ain't quite got it.
Y'all haven't got snow yet at all?
We had our first snow a couple weeks ago, but other than that, it's been scarce.
We had snow this week.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you know what? You keep it. Don't send it my way. I don't need to be scraping that stuff off my window.
Now, I will say it was like a dusting. There wasn't even like half an inch.
I guess I'll take a dusting. I mean, you know what? Mm-hmm. Give me the snow before Christmas. That's what I say. After Christmas, it's just I'm miserable with snow. But hey, pre-Christmas snow, I'm all in.
And this episode comes out exactly 7 days out from Christmas Day. So hopefully the snow is a-coming in our Midwestern states. We are going to have a Christmas Day episode because we record a couple of days before we usually air. So don't worry, you'll still get your dose of Ghost Machine on December 25th, and hopefully it'll be with snow on the ground around ya, so you can have a white Christmas. We do have a quick shout out this episode to, we're continuing to make new friends on the Instagram as usual, which is really exciting. And we have someone new who collaborated with us. This is Rogue.Productions. And the reason I say it that way is it's Rogue, R-O-G-U-E, the traditional spelling, .productions, but without the S at the end. It's a Z. So go check them out. They shared a set of Junkyard Joe Mezco action figure photos, and they collaborated with us, which is really cool. And since then, there have been like a couple others too. So we'll shout them out as we go. But we really want to emphasize and let everybody know we pretty much accept anything like that's Ghost Machine related, because our whole point of doing this whole thing is to grow the community together. So if you have something cool that you want to make, or you did, then you can collaborate with us. Or another great thing you can do is you can submit it to Ghost Machine Fan Content Friday by emailing ghostmachinefans@gmail.com, and we'll put it up there every Friday.
Those Rogue production images are fantastic. I got to look at them just before we started recording. The light source in those images is so faint, so you really kind of have to focus your eyes on the figure itself. So you're almost forced to appreciate certain details about the figure in those images that you might necessarily not if it had more traditional lighting. So really great work by Rogue Productions.
There's a whole world of toy photography that I do not understand. It's amazing how many people are taking pictures of this guy. But we have to run. We have to flee, Robert, because Snoggle is in the newsroom.
Well, we've got some fun news, and it pertains to one of the friends of the show, one of our favorite Canadians. Ghost Machine, Brian Cunningham, editor-in-chief and former Wizard employee, made a point of backing Armored 1/2 issue, which is a promotional Kickstarter issue that our friend and co-host Michael Schwartz and the Wizards, the Podcasting Guide to Comics, put together. So it's really cool that Kickstarter is still going on. It's done in the traditional 1/2 fashion, with it being a flip book. So everyone should definitely check it out.
You don't know what a half issue is necessarily, Snoggle. We should explain.
I sure don't.
Rob, I think I'm like a tad older than you, but I'm sure you're still very familiar with these. I just remember these were really prominent when I was a kid. So what's your impression of the Wizard magazine 1/2 issue phenomenon?
Well, you may have to fill me in on this, Nick. I mean, in my experience, half issues are like they traditionally fill in a gap either before a first issue or in between issues. Do I have that right, or do I have that wrong?
Oh no, that's not what this.
That's not what it is at all.
Nope. I'm showing my age, and Michael Schwartz is laughing right now as he listens to this because of it. So
no, you know what? He's Canadian. He's too nice to laugh at any of us.
That's true. He's chuckling.
That's what they want you to think.
No.
The loyalists. So what you're talking about is sometimes publishers will do like a 0.5 issue or something. And
yeah.
Like a gap. Like that's a thing, although it's rather uncommon, especially nowadays. 1/2 issues were issues that Wizard magazine put out promotionally for books. Like on my wall, I have Exo Man of War 1/2 gold or whatever, you know, and the way you got it was you filled out a thing and you paid money and you mailed it in from Wizard magazine and they mailed it to you. So that's typically how you would get them. The print runs were lower, but oftentimes they were flip books, which means you flip them around and it's another book on the other side. So it's half something else. But it was also, they tended to be thinner. And a lot of times people would say it's harder to get them in high grade because they would just get mailed back to you by Wizard. Getting a really 9.8 or whatever is harder in some people's eyes. So, and what they're doing is Wizard, the podcast guide to comics, they go through issues of Wizard magazine. And so now they are sponsoring a real 1/2 issue for Armored, our buddy Mike Schwartz's comics. So back that on Kickstarter if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, if you follow me at Comic Book Chronicles on TikTok or Comic Book Chronicles Rob on Instagram or Threads, I'm actually going to be reviewing all the issues of Armored that have come out so far on Christmas Day. So after,
oh my gosh, they're so good.
After you've checked out the Ghost Machine Fans podcast on Christmas Day, you come on over to my neck of the woods and spend some time with me. How about that?
That's such a fantastic idea, both that you're doing it on that day and that it's that book.
I've only read the first issue as of this recording, but I liked what I've read, and I'm anxious to see more.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
Super cool. It's a super cool book. What else we got in the newsroom here?
Well, Hornsby and Halo #1 is going to a second print, and here's a reminder that the next final order cutoff date coming up is January 6th, and that's for Hornsby and Halo #3, Rockefellers #3, and the second trade paperback for Geiger Volume 2. But yeah, there's your news peg there. Hornsby and Halo #1 go into a second printing. The boy is from heaven, the girl is from hell. How do they get along? Not so well. You want to check out that book by Peter Tomasi.
Yeah, I read that one. I got a kick out of it. I'm looking forward to doing our deep dive about it. And it's cool to see a book like that go to second print. I'm familiar with the artist on there because I'm a Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense fan. He's done some work over there, but I know not everybody is, and it's definitely a book worth checking out. After I read it, I really wanted to find out what happens in issue 2. So check out Hornsby and Halo #1. But if you didn't yet, the point is you're going to have to get the second printing of it because yet again, another Ghost Machine book sold out. So you can get one of those cool black and yellow second prints if you pre-order it from your local comic book shop. And there's one more important piece of news. This episode is going to air on December 18th, and it is just a couple of days after we have announced our nuclear winter event has started. So we do have a giveaway that's going on. We're about to start giveaway number 2, but we're doing 3 weeks of giveaways into the new year, 2 before Christmas, 1 after the new year, all Jeff Johns signed comic books. And we're also doing a whole lot of fun holiday related stuff on the Instagram. Nick Churton has an artist who's been making really fun. There's like a Junkyard who would look like the Grinch as Junkyard Joe illustration that was on there. Stuff like that is going on. So, hey, make sure to check that out. So regardless of when you hear this, as long as it's before, the second week of January, go on the Instagram, look at the pinned post related to the nuclear winter event. And that way, if one of the giveaways is still going on, you can participate for that one. Really, really fun. Excited about that. But now we got to talk about Devour. And it's been a little bit since this book came out, right? Like it's been almost like over a month since this book came out. We just haven't had a chance to get to it because we've had so many other things going on. There's so many books coming out from Ghost Machine. So we do need to talk about the covers before we can do our spoiler pause. So I know you both have that A cover.
Yeah, we've got cover A by Yvonne Reese, Danny Mickey, and Brad Anderson. It's our girl, Miss Goodbody, holding a parasite in a jar.
Yep. Spoilers. But that is exactly the case. And she looks really, really creepy. This is definitely like you can see all the work that Danny did with the shading and the shadows on her face to make her look more evil. I really thought that was pretty sweet.
It's all in the eyes and the face for me. It's just, she's staring right into your soul, and she's got the brow, it's almost triangular, and it's just she's got such a sinister look on her face. It's fantastic work.
Sinister is a really good word for it. What did you think of that cover, Snoggle, that 80s vibe?
Well, I know that is a weight loss product that I would not buy from that person. Because she looks super duper scary. It's beautiful. The lighting is perfection. I like how you brought up the eyes, like the lighting in the eyes somehow creates more life to the evil that you can really see there.
Create more life to the evil. That's a mission accomplished. So the second cover is by Layla, who is also the artist on the book. And this features the main character taking a big bite out of her own, presumably, wedding cake, right? But in the ravenous fashion that we saw the characters in the book do as well. I really dig her art in it's almost like a kind of Tim Burton-y, kind of dark, gritty something there for me. And what's interesting about this one to me is that you don't see the condition that she's in the wedding until the end of the book. And we haven't done our spoiler pause yet, so we can't go into detail yet, just in case someone has not read this. But if you notice, like around her knuckles especially, you can tell that she's rather emaciated. And so we know after reading this book when this event takes place compared to like when her physical state otherwise. But we'll talk about that. But super creepy too, yeah. And there's that kind of glowy thing in the eyes on that one too that you were talking about, Snoggle. And then there's one other one that we should talk about because there was a one for 10 variant by Gary Frank. I think that there's something psychological here. I would love to hear what you guys think about the psychological. So, Ghost Machine fans, we're talking about the C cover, which was the 1 for 10 retailer incentive variant. If you got 10, then they'd give you this cover. And it's got a picture of the main character there, but then there's this like massive shadow, scary, emaciated shadow behind her. Like her view of herself or it's intense, and it's very, very Gary Frank. So what do y'all think of that? What's that mean to you?
To me, this is the Tim Burton-ish cover. Like it's Nightmare Before Christmassy, I almost want to say, which is of course fitting for the time of year we're in. But yeah, it's the old silhouette that looks like a monster, and I like very strong faces on all these covers, and it's not like Lily, our character's face, is so it's not like we're zooming in on her or anything like that, but you can see the terror, the horror, the apprehension in her face. Her body language is great. So yeah, another very strong one from Gary Frank.
What's that shadow mean, though? Like, in her shadow, hanging over her is the dread of feeling like she has to be as thin, as bone thin as this terrible thing.
Her impending insecurities are just right behind her. They're literally just about to get her, and she just can't even see it.
Right. Cool.
Creepy.
Yeah. And then there's also a really sweet 1 for 25 variant, but it's the same as the first one. It just has different coloring. So check that one out if you are a ratio completionist. And by the way, this one went to a second print as well. So there is another one of those cool, like I mentioned, for Hornsby and Halo, a yellow and black second printing cover. So what must we do now that we've laid out these covers so wonderfully for the readers to choose from in their local comic book store, Snoggle?
I love when you call me Snoggle because it just gives very Superman vibes.
Exactly. Snoggle.
Well, if somehow you've made it to, 7-ish, 10 days before Christmas and you have not read Devour yet, you got to pause this immediately and get in your car and or walk, ride your bike, whatever, and go to your local comic book shop and go buy it and read it immediately because it's that good and it's time for us to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the spoiler pause has been had. We can talk about this book willy-nilly. Our traditional format is that we give a creator roll call. Robert, would you be so kind?
Absolutely. Okay, so it is written by friend of the show, Maytel Zahoot, and illustrated and inked by Layla Lees, who is a rather well-known artist. She illustrated a comic written by Emilia Clarke of Game of Thrones fame a few years ago. She also did a variant for Hyde Street #5, which is oncoming. Our colors are by Alex Sinclair, who, as we know, is currently coloring many premiere books for almost every major publisher.
He's another big one. He's another big colorist like Brad. So it's good to have even more talent there in the Ghost Machine pool.
Naturally.
They say. So, fantastic. Maytal was on the show, and she was awesome. She did give us some insight into this book and about some of the messaging that she was hoping to accomplish with the book, which we're definitely going to talk about. But as a reminder to everybody from a setting standpoint, it is a one-shot that is set in the universe of Hyde Street. And when we spoke to Ivan about this issue, he said that Devour is an example of a story about the victims, and that Hyde Street will typically be about the residents. And that jives with also us hearing recently that there's going to be a Miss Goodbody origin story coming in a few issues of Hyde Street because she's a resident, not a victim. So, it's even just the idea of, okay, well, this family of women live in presumably the real world. And then when they go buy the next generation's Parasite, they go back to Hyde Street. So they became victims somehow in a very different way. Or, if you read Hyde Street too, then it's like, well, wait a minute. Why would a resident of Hyde Street perpetuate this at all? Why wouldn't she just give them something to kill them based on what we understand that Pranky is doing? I think there is going to be more. It happened on Hyde Street, blah, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like more one shots that are of the specific characters. I also think perhaps, and this is just speculation, like Hyde Street's already a super spooky book. So if you're going to do a one shot and you really want it to like be a successful one shot, like putting it out right around Halloween was probably, like a big, I mean, it almost instantly got a second print. I think we were talking to Maytal and we got the news. She got the news like, oh, there's a second print. And this was like before like a day or two before release date, Nick?
Yeah, it was pretty neat.
So I think like as far as, I mean, that's one of the things I super love about Ghost Machine is there's such like a tight knit of creators that I'm sure that Jeff and everybody on the team had like a plan in place. Although it's not typical of what you see from like other comic book companies. Right. Like they would usually get, 6 to 8, maybe 10 before they did like a one shot that was like its own little teeny tiny story, But I'm going to guess Halloween had something to do with it.
Yeah, it was advertised a bit around that tad, I think, as well. So that makes sense. Here, I got a dad joke for you. There's a lot to digest in this book. And it just came out of nowhere. So what I'd like to do with this one, if you don't know Ghost Machine fans, last time we did an episode, Rob joined me because Snoggle was sick. And so instead of talking about Devour, we talked about Rockefellers. And the reason that I chose to do that is because I really felt like there was no way to talk about Devour without a woman's perspective on the show. And so what I'd like to do, I know that we've all got some really good notes about this comic, but Snoggle, can you give us your first impressions of the book, how it made you feel? I know you kind of touched on a little bit of this with Maytal, and lead us to, your impressions of how the villain, for all intents and purposes, her name, like Miss Goodbody, like what does that lead us to?
Initial impressions, I mean, it hit home pretty deeply, and I can only speak as a perspective of a woman. Our entire lives are about what size you are. You're too big, you're too skinny, you're too this, you're too that. Nothing is ever good enough. So I would say a large percentage of women who I know have been on diets of all sorts. You've done the keto, you've done this, but it has been generationally passed down too. Whether it be from like a parent figure or sisters, or usually it's a parent figure, like, oh, you're eating too much, or, and it's just a curse because it came from their parents and it keeps on going down. So, I mean, the fact to put that into a horror-esque book, which makes it like, fun and spooky. I do think it's an actually pretty serious topic that she talks about here, because it doesn't necessarily have to just be body image, right? I think it really boils down to generational curses and how they really fall through like each layer of family as the years go on. How do you break that? And that's super scary.
For sure. She sets the tone of that right from the beginning, because that's where we're not introduced right away to Miss Goodbody. We're introduced right away to Lily's mom and the cookies, and right away like, don't eat the cookies, you'll end up like me. And that's who also went and got, she's the first generation of who picks up the thing in the jar. Now, this is Ghost Machine fans. I'm talking about when she's like at her house. This is very early in the book. She's watching the 80s workout videos. I also love that this is set in that time period. then she has the thing on her table, the jar that says Devour on it, the product that she bought from Miss Goodbody. And she goes over, she opens it, she looks at it. Now, we don't know what's in there. What do you guys think of the fact that tell me, what did you think it was? And why is it significant that we don't actually get to see the horrific thing that is in there until much later in the story?
I didn't really know I had no clue what was in there, honestly. I mean, I had a feeling that it wasn't good considering where we were, where we are. I mean, I assumed it was a monstrosity of some kind, but, the significance, obviously, that you don't see what's in there is that, now you spend the duration of the issue wondering, okay, what's in there? What does this thing look like? What is the thing at all? So, you have that mystery element that sort of guides you through the issue to a large extent.
Yeah, right? Because when we see the other women in the family, as, we turn the page and they're trying in the wedding dress, and our main character she's in the wedding dress and it doesn't fit, and we've got those dynamics. Then we see her mom and her grandmother super duper duper thin. And the way that Layla does this is she exemplifies things that really highlight like emaciation, with the kneecaps, the elbows, the shoulder bones, and all of that. And so we begin well before we know what the heck is in that jar. We know that it causes that. We know it's not like, oh, it just is a magic thing that makes you really, really fit. It's like, no, whatever it is, it is not, it's harmful to you. Like, it's very, and that's really, I thought Layla just did such an awesome job of that. Like, it's really subtle, but it's really like, ooh, wow, they are very thin.
Eating itself is not portrayed very handsomely in this book, because you open that first page and you've got the soda, you've got the donuts, you've got the food. She's having a good time with the food. And the thing that I like about this is, I mean, chewing is something we all do, but there's a reason that when you have two characters sitting at a table eating, you're not focusing on the chewing itself, because it's not particularly appetizing to watch.
Sure.
And, you can practically hear this opening page, that kind of thing.
I will say, I think that was the point of that opening cover, because like, if you've ever had a problem with your relationship with food and your body, like even the very aspect of like how you eat, what you eat can be very shameful. So like, I think that's why we begin with this first cover of being like, even just drinking a pop, let's all like agree that's kind of a normal thing to do. Like if I had a Diet Coke right here, or, I'm drinking something, you guys aren't like, but the way that it's perceived, even when you're doing it and you have a problem, or perceived like, oh my gosh, my mom said I shouldn't drink this or I'll be too fat, right. Or, oh, I need to eat more because I'm getting too skinny. Everything that like circles around food can like make you even think about eating as disgusting itself.
It's a great way to sort of take you there. If you've never been there before, and sort of put you in that mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, when she like opened up the tube, I instantly was like, it is some sort of parasitic worm. But I just I was thinking horror-esque. And then obviously that was my initial thought. And as the book progressed, I was like, oh yeah, but I wonder, I didn't know what it looked like. So it still like made it fun. But I was most certain it wouldn't have been bugs that were in their body, or a pill that looked so scary. I was like, oh, it's going to be something that lives in their body and eats the food.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to skip entirely ahead, because there is something to note, that she resists going to whatever this solution is, because there's some exposition where she's trying to diet and she's trying to exercise and she's saying, I can do it. There's a sense of she's overcoming the pressures that society and her mother and grandmother are placing on her, potentially, and then she has like a bridal shower and she's lost a little bit of weight and somebody says something nice about that. And then it's really interesting to me. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about Aunt Sherry, right? Because Aunt Sherry is at the bridal shower and she's the one she's like grandma's age, I think, ish. And she's like clearly under the same, she's got a parasite, but she's like eating a bunch. And she's the first one of them that we see like just going to town on a bunch of food that also is in that condition. So this is when we first start to get a hint of like, what the heck is going on here? But Aunt Sherry doesn't align with Mom and Grandma about the morality of this and whether or not it was a good idea and whether or not it should be perpetuated, right? She's like eating a lot, but then the grandmother comes over to her and says, Sherry, you stop that immediately. You're in public, because she's like ravenous, right? And then Sherry's like, how am I supposed to live like this?
Yeah.
And so it's like Aunt Sherry and Grandma have the same thing inside of them, but they're dealing with it in two very different ways.
But it's very hypocritical what she says to the aunt, in my opinion. She very literally put the monster inside of that person. So it's kind of like a metaphor for like the monster, or the oh my gosh, I need to eat all the time, or I can't eat, or I shouldn't eat, like having that struggle with eating. And then she's looking at her and she's like, have a little self-control and self-respect. And it works for the rest of us. It's just a very condescending thing, which usually when people are dealing with like having issues with their body or how they eat, like that is how a lot of people will be like, well, the rest of us can just make sure we don't eat too much, in my opinion. Because I'm assuming that's her sister.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's like great Aunt Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand. So,
and you know what's so sad is like, and I understand these are drawings, but the bride to be, like, she looks good.
Yeah. She certainly looks like by far the healthiest one in the room. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. She looks great, and they're all looking at her like she's not good enough because she can't get into like a size 6 or 8 wedding dress. The whole thing is just wild to me.
No, I think that I think Aunt Sherry is almost a Hope character, because she's fighting whatever it is. She's fighting the parasite. She's fighting the thoughts or whatever. So she's your window into the fact that, okay, you can have this be a part of you and not have it totally consume you. She's fighting, but obviously it's a losing battle. So she's almost a window of hope for our main character, Lily.
Yeah, that's a really good. She's like, you're miserable one way or the other. You're miserable if you're super skinny and you're, this way, that way, whatever. She's like, how do I live like this? This is freaking awful.
It's funny that you say that, because this character gave me hope for Lily. And I did not expect Lily to end up the same as everybody else in the end. And this was one of the nuggets that was like, oh yeah, Aunt Sherry must be in there as like a warning, and that's why like this person won't repeat the mistakes of the past, And
it's funny because she later becomes a literal warning.
Right? Yeah. So and then they're cleaning up from that bridal shower. And it's an important detail. This is when we first see Lily's mom and grandma just gorging themselves. Now they just do it in private on like splash, page that they've got there. And that's and just even like the way that they're eating is like barbaric, and the way she's portrayed just like with a haunch of meat.
They just look disgusting, like with their ribs and like they look like actual monsters. They don't look like women anymore.
Oh yes,
there's no inhibition. There's no inhibition at all in terms of the consumption of food, and I think that's the idea. Okay, nobody's around now. Now we can become, to your point, the monsters. We can do this thing that in our minds is monstrous. So I think, and to your point, Snuggle, they don't look like people anymore. Almost.
No, when she's sitting there eating that turkey leg, it looks like she has like arms as ribs that are about to like spike. They look kind of alien-esque.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm wondering if that's a conscious decision on the part of Layla Lee's. I mean, to how far do you exaggerate the proportions? I would love to know what her mindset was going. I mean, in her mind, are these proportions exaggerated, or are we pushing the envelope a little bit? I mean, those are the artistic decisions that you have to make in terms of a scene like this.
I think very purposefully she's trying to depict. It's very similar to if you've seen, Stephen King's Thinner.
Yeah,
you got to make somebody look really thin to have like bones sticking out and to make it grotesquely thin. So I personally think it was like that was absolutely a choice. But I bet they get like super duper thin if we're just like deep diving into something we didn't really see in the comic. Like when they engorge themselves, I wonder if they like kind of like fill up a little bit and look a little normal for a bit.
Maybe.
While the parasite is like, nom, nom, nom. Who's to say? I think it was a smart choice to show when she's at that party. And in the other perspective of it, and she had lost a little bit of weight. She just was like a woman. And that still wasn't good enough for her mom and her grandma. Like it still wasn't good enough. But she showed like a really good normal woman's body, even when you get the scene of she's trying her wedding dress on, like after we get this like engorged woman scene and the buttons won't button. Like you see, she looks just fine. She's very pretty. She has like a little bit of weight on her stomach, but that's super normal for a woman. Like she looks fine, and she's in there crying. And then you look at her grandma, and like her elbows could be, I mean, she could throw those bows, and they look sharp.
Like you stab somebody.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I think it was really good to just show the vastness of it all.
It's interesting that you not only get the emaciated look, but you get the normal stuff. You get Lily looking in the mirror, and she's not a Rob Liefeld drawing. She's she's a person, and there are flaws there, but they're not, we don't zoom in on the flaws necessarily, but you can see them. And so she's not a vision of perfection. She's very normal. So I think you get sort of two ends of the spectrum from an artistic standpoint. And that's interesting to look at, just from my perspective, at least.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Strangers in Paradise by Terry Moore?
I've heard of it, never seen it.
It's really similar in that he does a great job of drawing women the right way. I think Layla really does that as well. It's funny because I was looking at this page that Snoggle was talking about where she's trying the wedding dress on again. Leads her back to Miss Goodbody as a result. And it's just, I like how it's a realistic drawing. I like how all the characters in this they look like actual people, and there's nuance to each of them. And so she goes, she tries to dress on again. She isn't where she wants to be. She's going to go back to the weight loss store. I think it's pretty neat that when she goes in the door and there's like the bell right in the background, Mr. X-Ray's walking by. It's kind of just one of those little nuggets.
Well, and I shouted out in the very first book, we saw Mrs. Goodbody's shop.
Yeah, and Hyde Street #1, for sure.
Honestly, I didn't even notice that Mr. X-Ray was in the background of that shot. I knew that they were in the 2-page spread. He and Pranky were there, obviously. Right. And obviously we see Pranky later but I had not noticed him, so that's a good observation.
I like that character a lot. So she's back in there. She's talking to Miss Goodbody. Miss Goodbody, she gets brought there by Grandma because the ultimate conclusion is like, you can't do it. You gotta go here. You gotta do this thing because you gotta fit into this wedding dress. Like, what a horrible society we live in. You know, she's giving her the rundown, and this is what gets me about this book, and not in a bad way, but I did, like I said before, I did not expect the ending because Ghost Machine fans, Lily is resisting. Like, she gets all the way to the store. We think, oh, she's gonna succumb, and she still is like, no, she's not gonna do it. Like, she's reading information about it. Miss Goodbody's trying to sell her. Grandma is like, come on, and she still is like, no, I'm not gonna do it. Not when the real problem is me. And then she goes out of the store. And I'm just saying, like, I personally see that. And I'm like, this is going to be an uplifting story about breaking the traditions that were so bad and the inherited horrors that Becky was talking about. And I think that it's like this emotional misdirection, right? Because then it's reinforced for me further. I'd like to know what you guys think. But she runs into Pranky out there. And it's like she runs into Pranky, who's trying to give her some like donuts or cookies or something. And she decides to decline. And then he looks at them and they're covered in like worms and maggots. So it's even like she's so good that she's like resisting the temptations of Hyde Street. Like, this girl's like, boom, like she's going to get out of there and stuff. And then it just takes a turn back down to the darker road that it needs to go on to lead us back to despair.
We'll get there. I don't want to fast forward too much, but I don't really think her taking she said no. Her mother forced it upon her. You can't take the monster out. What's inside your body would be my assumption. And I'm going to assume it somehow like infects who you are a little bit too. Like most like alien type movies where there's something in you and it's controlling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think she's the one who did it. I think it was forced upon her, but we'll get there.
No, I think you're right. And I hadn't thought of it that way. And that like makes it worse.
It does. It makes it that much more sad because she's like, yeah, I mean, just this little, it's heartbreaking that she's like, you think I don't want to be skinnier? Like, the only problem you see is my size. And her grandma's like, well, you're wonderful other than that. And she's just like, you know what? I'm done. She just leaves. And like I really like the style here when you can tell she's writing in some sort of diary because it's like on the lined paper. She's even talking about like it hurt more than I even cared to admit.
And it's just funny that when she walks out of that store, she looks like by far the healthiest, most beautiful woman in the comic.
I have a question for both of you guys though. And maybe for everyone. Did anyone notice that when she's walking down the street, there's a dog peeing?
What?
Yes,
dog pan.
in the pranky page.
This won't work out.
On the pranky pit. I'm looking for it now. Let me see.
I'm so tired of it. It's like the very thing when it says, excuse me. Do you see that?
See, now you just ruined the scene for me. The dog, he's going to, oh God.
But do you know what that makes me think is that's like an Easter egg. It's foreshadowing for some other book in the future on Hyde Street.
Oh, yeah?
I was going to say it's foreshadowing that, like, she looks great, but it's not going to work out in the end because on that panel, the dog is peeing. It like
I don't know. I think maybe Layla just wanted to draw a dog using the
maybe.
Yeah. I also have another question for you guys.
Okay.
Do you see when she's saying, "Oh, you're so sweet, but I'm good, thank you"? Right behind the light post is a like little shadow figure.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think that is?
I have no idea.
That's a good question.
And it says gurgle gurgle.
Mm-hmm.
Sound effect right by the shadow figure.
Yeah.
Gurgle. I don't think that's inside the box of cookies.
No, no.
What the heck is that?
It looks like it deliberately has like eyes. So I don't think it's a park. I don't think it's a parking meter. I think it's
definitely something like spying on them.
Like the scorekeeper, maybe?
Mm.
Didn't he have glasses like that? Circular glasses in the second issue?
I don't remember. I'm just saying, I just noticed that.
I don't know why he would be there.
The gurgling effect is interesting. What's gurgling? Because you're right, I don't think it's coming from the box. I don't necessarily buy into the notion that the dog going potty is an Easter egg. This, I think, might be one.
Mm-hmm.
That I think you might be onto something.
I've read this book multiple times. And I will say, as we were looking at this page a little bit more and chit-chatting, I'm rambling, I'm like, hey, is there a guy next to that light bulb?
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Did you just notice that now?
Yes.
I didn't notice it. She just told me.
Did y'all? I didn't notice the dog peeing either. I think from there, I was like, what is going on in this page?
That's funny. Interesting about the gurgle gurgle is that same gurgle gurgle is what appears on the next page when Lily is back at her job at school teaching. And the gurgle gurgle appears to be the sound of Aunt Sherry's stomach growling. Now,
there you go.
Yeah, I'm just
Oh.
Now, I don't know that that's Aunt Sherry behind the lamppost because it looks like whoever's
right.
Yeah, who knows?
But it's interesting it transitions to that, right? Because she's teaching at school. Aunt Sherry busts in the same condition that we know of, the others with the parasite are in, but she's like to the point of passing out because she doesn't want to do this anymore. So she's not eating, but she also wants to warn Lily that she's in danger. It's very dramatic. We have some more gurgle gurgle, and then she's down and goes off in an ambulance. And it's just one more thing where we're like, man, this girl's going to make it. It's going to be, I feel like she gets the warning. So it's one more thing to make me feel like she's going to make it out of this because she got the warning.
She is getting a lot of warning signs, and it does lead you to believe, oh, okay, well, she's getting this sign, she's getting that sign. She's okay. Clearly she can see something's going on here. So it does kind of lead you in that optimistic direction in a dark sort of way.
I find it really interesting that when she goes to, her mom or grandma's house or whatever, her mom doesn't seem to be pushing the initiative to lose weight to her as much as her grandma does. It's just weird to me.
I would agree with that. And these letters, it's neat because you're talking about Snoggle, how she ends up going back to this house with all the dark lighting after the ambulance takes Aunt Sherry away. And we see more of Rob Lee's awesome letters because Rob's got all the gurgle letters. But after her mom and her have a minute, she's like, something's going on. We got to talk about what's going on. Something's wrong. Then we have these just chewing. It's the best way I can explain them is chewing sounds that he makes happen with the same font of the gurgle, but it's these like GRMHRMNM chewing sounds. And it's like creepy, that's a really creepy chewing situation that Rob Lee lays out for you there. And then, so I guess, it's the way that it's the way that audio can be applied to body horror, I guess, in a way. Because even the letters, like, they're small when she starts to hear it. And then as she walks towards the door, they get a little bigger. And then when she gets all the way to the door, they're really big because as she opens the door, they're bigger. And it's like, I can hear it without hearing it. And I so dig Rob Lee, man. I really love Rob Lee.
The king of letters.
Yeah, so cool.
To your point, though, Snuggle, I mean, Patricia is less vehement about the whole lose weight thing. And I think that, you can trace that back. My favorite page my favorite sequence in the entire issue is the sequence where Bernice finds a young Patricia rooting through the cupboard and finding the cookies and all that. She's not the only victim in this story, obviously, but she is somebody that we see victimized at a very early age. And I just think that's part of her journey in the sense that she's still looking at her mom with that sense of wonder, in the sense that she's not completely down the road as far as her mother is. I mean, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sequence with Patricia and Bernice early in the issue, I mean, to me, it's the standout scene in the entire book. And, which is saying something because this is a book with, monstrous parasites and things like that. But I mean, you just look at that little girl's body language and you look at the eyes. And I mean, I've got this girl, she can't be more than 5, 6, 7 years old. And, what hit me about that is because, I've got a young daughter myself. I got 2 young daughters, but one who's around this age. You're so impressionable.
Yes.
And vulnerable at that age. Look at the way she hugs her mom in that panel where she's holding the cookies behind her. I mean, that got me. It's such a beautifully drawn scene from a facial perspective, from a body language perspective. And I think that when you trace it, toward that later scene, we get not only Lily's journey, but we get Patricia's journey. Because, she, in a way, is the first real victim that we're seeing here, because she didn't choose this.
That makes it even worse, just to really understand those particular panels on that level when you see the condition that she's in later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, when you see this 1-page splash that Layla has.
I've been waiting.
Yeah, to eat the
That's
chicken.
horrifying.
She's got
with like the demon eyes and everything. But do you think that, okay, so when she first gets into the house, right? And she's talking to her mom's not being super pressuring. Then she goes to investigate the noise. And she sees this amazing splash page that I think Nick was about to talk about. But her mom changes tune afterwards. And I wonder if they're different people when they're hungry, like they're hangry. Which is
like
real.
You're not you when you're hungry.
Yeah, like hanger is actually scientifically proven. Fun fact. So I wonder if they become like more demonic. Because I mean, she's got black eyes. Can you imagine if you saw your Mima?
I was gonna say, look, yeah, the eyes, they tell a story of possession almost.
Yeah, and they're reminiscent of other characters on Hyde Street. We've seen when Hyde Street bears its whatever, like Frankie's eyes turn that way, Miss Goodbody's eyes turn that way, and then Mom's kindness seems to fade, and they corner her, and she's got another dose of the Devour or whatever it's going to be. And then we finally get to see what is in that jar. And so I got two questions. What did you all think of the aesthetic of the parasite? Kind of like Tremors or something. And also in the panel where we see the parasite come out of the jar that's going to presumably go into Lily and is going after Lily, the parasites for Mom and Grandma also come out and do this kind of like alien-esque face hugger like performance thing for a second, and it just made me wonder, like, what does that mean to you when you see that they've developed these like jaws that come out like that? It could just be.
What does it mean to you?
Well, I'm just like it. It makes me wonder if like they're so connected to these creatures that like that it becomes like part of them, and I'm just surprised that their parasites popped out too. That's all.
Well, the one that's coming out of the Devour tub, the pinkish one, it doesn't have the extra appendages that the other two have. I'll call them appendages for lack of a better term, but so it we're the camera, quote unquote, is seeing it from a closer angle, but it's I think what we're supposed to think is that it's smaller than the ones that are coming out of Bernice and Lily's mom. So I guess you can make the assumption that, okay, they've been in these women for much longer periods of time. They've fed off their bodies. They've been nurtured. Whereas this one, this fresh one, so to speak, doesn't necessarily have that status. And maybe that accounts for the different coloring, the pink versus the purple.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was thinking it's like it's younger, right? And it's got a gross stuff. And yeah, so it's super gross. The aesthetic is pretty intense. And when I flipped this page, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw her elbows, man, when I saw Lily in her wedding dress, and I saw that she clearly was in the same state as the others, I was bummed. I wasn't bummed like this is bad storytelling. I thought it's great.
Yeah.
But they wanted me to be bummed, right? They want me to feel that. They want me to be like, oh, man, no, I thought she was going to make it. Oh, man. She's like, and then it's like, and I just love how they amplify that feeling that discomfort that they're causing us with the smile on her face.
Yep.
Because she's so happy to be in this state and condition. Even though she knew she was going into that house to try to not do that. Like she was trying to fix something. What's going on here? Instead, she just became a part of it, just like the others.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you are trying to fight something day after day after day, it gets tiring. You get worn down. Like when you just completely are telling, whether it's mom, other people in your life, or even yourself, like, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough. It's exhausting, you know? So I think like once you finally, I do think there's like a little bit of the creature, once you're a part of it, your, mindset's a little bit different. I don't think you can get that parasite out of there. I mean, you can only fight that for so long.
Yeah,
you're never good enough.
With it, I don't have to fight anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to fight anymore. Even if I lost the fight, at least the exhaustion of me not having to fight, and the exhaustion of me having to fight is gone. And now the situation is what it is. I agree with you though, Snoggle, that I think that we're not seeing in this page where she's got her, hands to her cheeks. I don't think we're seeing strictly her in there. I think that part of it is the monster. We're not seeing Lily in her entirety here. Part of this is the possession having taken hold of her.
It's like, ooh, look at how good we look.
And Nick, to your point, the irony of it, she looks so happy.
Yeah.
And yet look at the condition she's in.
Yeah.
She got what she wanted, and she got what she wanted. Are we talking enough here about the generational aspect of this story? Because that's important, and it's something that honestly I hadn't even considered.
It's the little voice in your head was put there by, I think it's why it's very poetic that her mom puts the parasite within her. Because it's like these ways that we feel about ourselves or how we treat others, or, the generational curses that, like, my dad yelled at me, so I have now yelled at my kids, and my kids yell at their kids, etc. I think that they did an excellent job here. That's why the mom actually like physically put the parasite in her.
So she did it literally and figuratively. And, again, that's something that, it was something that, I hadn't considered, just as someone who had never, who doesn't have a lot of experience knowing people with, issues with food, issues with eating. And it was, I almost hate to use this word, but it was educational to me. And it opened up a dimension of this issue for me that was not there before. And I think that that's something that Maytel Zahoot and everybody involved with this book should be commended for.
Yeah, we talked a little bit with her about how, this is all for a lot of fun. Obviously, comic books are fun. We like all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's kind of neat on the unique occasion when we can have a conversation about something just a little more significant than the fact that we're really excited about these different properties and how unique and wonderful they are. And I think she did a pretty good job of making you think. And I think it also is one where with rereads, you think differently and you think more, because my first impression was very much about the body imagery stuff. My second impression was a lot more about what Becky was saying earlier about the generational, making sure not to repeat the mistakes of the past. And that was where the way that this book concludes for me was so, it's just, it takes it just a step further, because really what you were talking about in that kitchen, in that scene, is where she's planting the seed when a person is so impressionable, right? Like age 6 or 7 or whatever. And about how, like, kind of in a way that's reprehensible because the person is so impressionable. It's so easy to do that. And so this takes it yet a step further to where she is literally in the crib. Her child later is
Lily's child.
Yeah. It's just, and so there's no choice. There's no influence. There's no impression. It's just, I'm going to make this decision for you. And who knows how the heck that thing would affect an infant. I don't even want to think about it. But that to me felt very Tales from the Crypty. I don't know, but did you guys ever watch that as kids? And it was one of those things where it's like, we know it's not going to work out because at the end we got to go back to the Crypt Keeper and he's got to have something to say. And I felt like Miss Goodbody was kind of like the Crypt Keeper with her little outro or whatever you want to call it, where we see that she's kind of like singing Rockabye Baby there, and there's a picture of the infant and like a thank you note for all of the help written. Oh, and it's just like, oh, and then just shelf after shelf after shelf of the parasite. Just, man. And she's got those black eyes too, though. On that last panel, she's got those black eyes that grandma had. So Hyde Street does that to you. So on this last page, she's pretty creepy. That the tone is set there, but there is a little thing there that says deliveries 9,998, and that's interesting because of what we learn about Pranky and his number of deliveries later and what he's been doing as you continue to read Hyde Street. So pay attention to that. But again, this one was by Maytal, and she has told us that she's going to be returning to do other Ghost Machine work. We don't really know what it is going to be yet, but this issue also was nominated as Issue for the Year by Nerd Initiative's Cheersies, which the voting for concluded a couple of weeks ago. But they're going to be announcing the results of that on an episode of their show later this month. So hopefully Ghost Machines Devour, It Happened on Hyde Street, wins that one.
And this is her first comic book work, period.
Is my understanding.
Because, I know she worked on television. She worked with Stargirl. This is her first comic book work ever of any kind.
Yup. Yes, sir.
Which speaks volumes to the talent that she has and that she brings to the table.
Well, she spoke with us pretty extensively about when her and Jeff worked together on a TV, Stargirl, that like there was an instant connection and like story writing, etc. And then when he said, "Hey, I'm doing Ghost Machine. Do you want to learn how to write comic books?" Yes.
Right.
Say less. And then it was kind of like just a journey from there. So I think one, super talented writer, obviously, and probably has one of the best teachers, if not the best. I'm going to say the best.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, it reminds me that she did say that the next thing she was going to be working on was with the same team as Devour, and Jeff did say there's something coming out in the future from the Devour team on our interview. So yeah, we'll get some more action from these folks. I really, really dig Layla Lazard, so make sure to check her out on Instagram. She does a lot of other cool stuff too.
She's good at the creepy.
Oh yeah, she posts a lot of creepy stuff that she does, and I dig it for sure.
I like spooky when it's done right. I'm not like a gore type person, but when something's like, ooh,
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not normally a horror person either, but you can pick that. You don't necessarily have to be a horror person to enjoy this book and Hyde Street in general. Yeah. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. Well, hey, looking forward to more from the Devour team. But as usual, we have a listener mail. And, we haven't done one of these in a little bit because we didn't do one with Jeff. And we didn't have Snoggle on the episode before. So, Becky, would you like to read the listener mail?
Sure. Listener mail comes from Chantilly, which I'm going to assume is like the Chantilly cream. 78T9 writes, I recently started reading Ghost Machine comics as a result of seeing the Mezco Junkyard Joe action figure. I read the trade for that and the original Geiger. I don't really understand what to read now, though. I like your show, by the way, but right now I am just catching up on deep dives of those series. Thank you.
Isn't it crazy that an action figure is getting people to read a comic book?
It's a great figure, man.
It is a great figure. I remember back in the day when I would go to Target, I would go to Kmart, and sometimes you'd see action figures, and that would make you then go buy the comic.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't necessarily as
I think that's always been a thing. Yeah. I have My Little Ponies before I saw a single My Little Pony movie. Same with Rainbow Bright, Care Bears.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I'm just saying this is a story we've heard a little bit lately because we We did one Fan Friday a couple weeks ago. There was 17 different toy photographers, all Junkyard Joe. And people are like, yeah, I gotta go read that comic book. But this is a pretty good question, right? Because there was Mad Ghost before there was Ghost Machine. And yes, obviously, if you listen to our show in order, you'll go through everything chronologically and catch up, and that'll guide you.
Yeah.
You know, how did you, start reading Ghost Machine and Mad Ghost, Rob? Like, can you answer this question for Chantilly? Like, we're obviously, I think you probably know the answer, but so it looks like Chantilly has read the first 6 issues of Junkyard Joe and the first original Geiger, and that's it.
So the question is really, where do you start with Ghost Machine? Do I have that right?
They have read the first 6 issues of Junkyard Joe and the first 6 issues of Geiger, which were Mad Ghost publications, and they came out in like 2021 and 2022.
Yep.
And so if you're just getting to it now and you go to your local comic book store, you say, hey, can you tell me about Ghost Machine? They're going to be like, yeah, there's Geiger, Redcoat, Rook, Hyde Street, Rockefellers, and Hornsby and Halo. And there's also a Devour one-shot. They're not going to necessarily reference those original miniseries, and there's some really cool continuity there. So, bridge the gap.
I
mean, here's the thing. I didn't read initially the source material. I came into Ghost Machine at Ghost Machine #1. So you don't necessarily have to read the source material if you want to get into it. But I think as far as their question, where do I go from here? I mean, I think based on the fact that they've read Geiger, I think Geiger is a good entry point. And the good thing about all these different stories is that they're not at this point cross-pollinated. So you can come into Redcoat, let's say, and just read Redcoat and not say, oh, well, if you read this, you also have to read that because that informs this. And then you should read Rook because Rook is where this character goes. I mean, everything right now is very self-contained. I mean, not necessarily 100%, but, to the point that,
I think Geiger and Redcoat will cross, though, later. So if they want to stay, if they like Geiger and seeing the Junkyard Joe and everything, because I bet we'll get some Junkyard Joe comics in 2025, 2026. So I would tell them to go start with the new Geiger and Redcoat and then kind of add on some others after they catch up on that. Like to read right back to us.
How about Geiger, Redcoat, and Rook Exodus? Since those were the original 3 of the run. Those are the ones I would try out. Yeah. And then maybe expand from there.
Yeah, and from exactly where you're at, Chantilly 7089, I feel like that's the name of a very cool droid or something. And you've read Junkyard Joe Volume 1 and Geiger Volume 1, so that means that if you go to our wiki on ghostmachinefans.com, there some parts of it are sparse. We're looking for contributors, but all the issues are on there. And so what you can do is you'll see that like next is Geiger Ground Zero, which is a 2-issue miniseries that came out before Ghost Machine #1 that Rob mentioned. You'll see the Blizzard on there, which is like a side story that you don't have to read, but you should.
I was going to say you should read the Blizzard before you read Redcoat.
Yeah, you should. And
the Blizzard was so good.
It is super good. And we did a deep dive about it. And so you then can read Ghost Machine 1 and then start reading Geiger and Redcoat as part of the Unnamed. Now, at that point, here's the distinction, and I would think that this might be maybe news to somebody who just got into this because of the action figure. When you read Geiger and Redcoat, then that's part of the world of the Unnamed. But then when you read Rook Exodus, it doesn't. Like when Rob says that they're not really cross-pollinated, there's like some nuanced cross-pollination that has occurred. Nuance, very minimal, between Geiger, Redcoat, and Junkyard Joe. There will never be any of that with Rook Exodus, at least other than like on a multiversal referential level. Like we saw something on a nod to it recently, but That's its separate thing. That's Ghost Machine's science fiction universe. And Hornsby and Halo and the Rockefellers are Ghost Machine's Family Odysseys universe. And Hyde Street and Devour and all the one-shots that happened on Hyde Street are going to be the horror universe. So that's definitely something that I bet would confuse you. But if you liked the characters you've been reading about so far, just make sure you stick with Geiger and Redcoat. And then, for example, Geiger number 10 is coming out, and it's got Dylan Dietrich, who won the Kubert School Scholarship on it. He did the C cover. It's really, really cool. He won that Ghost Machine Kubert Scholarship that we talked about a while ago with Rob and Brad. And that book is featuring the return of Junkyard Joe. So yeah, we are getting more Junkyard Joe books in 2025, Becky, for sure. And that's why it's a lot of books, but it's not a lot of backtracking, right? Like, it's all new stuff. It's all new ideas. It's really, really neat. And it's so easy to get caught up. And you're well over halfway there, having read these Chantilly. So anyways,
I would say look at what jumps out to you and go for it. And then if you like it, I think you'll inevitably branch out from there.
For sure. Well, I gotta say, this has been another fantastic deep dive, and it was wonderful to have Rob from Comic Book Chronicles with us once again. Why don't you remind everybody about how to find you on the interwebs, sir?
I am at Comic Book Chronicles on TikTok. I am at Comic Book Chronicles Rob on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube. I'm also on Blue Sky and Lemonade these days, so my empire is expanding, by God. I do short form video reviews of comic books, not just the Ghost Machine stuff, but there's also, there's Marvel stuff, there's DC stuff, there's stuff from all the major publishers. And like I said, on Christmas Day, I'm going to dive into Armored. So I look forward to seeing you guys.
Definitely. Well, as usual, to all of you out there, thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast. You can say podcast too.
Keep that in there.
At the end, we all go podcast.
Oh, we do? Oh, I didn't know that. Podcast.